My name is Laurel Bennett, and I was born and raised in Portland, Oregon. The Bennett house sat on a quiet street lined with maple trees that turned golden every fall. It was a gray craftsman home with white trim, wide bay windows, and a porch swing that creaked softly whenever the wind blew. My father built it with his own hands in the late 1980s, and after he passed, my brother Ethan and I inherited it together. Zillow said it was worth around $780,000, but to me it was priceless. It held my childhood laughter, the scent of my mother's baking, and the echo of family dinners that once meant something. I lived there even after Ethan got married because it was still our family home. I helped maintain it, paid the property taxes for 2 years straight, and replaced the water heater when it burst during a freezing winter. I never imagined that one day I would be thrown out of the very house I had protected. It happened on a Thursday evening. I had just returned from the grocery store, balancing 2 paper bags filled with food I planned to cook for all of us. I parked my old Toyota in the driveway, humming softly, when I noticed something strange. My suitcase was sitting on the porch. My clothes were spilling out of it. My shoes were lined up like discarded evidence. For a moment, I thought it was a cruel joke. Then I saw them standing in the doorway. Ethan, with his hands in his pockets, and beside him, his wife Camila, her glossy dark hair pulled back perfectly, her lips painted a shade of red that made her look like she belonged in a commercial. She was holding the house keys and smiling as if she had just closed a successful deal. "This is our home now," she said coolly. "My husband and I will live here, and no one else." I blinked, confused. "What are you talking about? This is our family house. I live here too." Ethan's expression hardened. He wouldn't look directly at me. "You need to find your own life, Laurel," he said flatly. "You're a burden to us." A burden. The word landed like a slap. I had helped him pay off his student loans years ago. I had covered 2 of his mortgage payments when his company downsized. Every corner of that house had something of me in it. My sweat, my savings, my time. I felt my throat tighten, but I forced my voice to stay calm. "The deed has both our names on it," I reminded him. "Dad made sure of that. We're equal owners." Camila gave a small, mocking laugh. "Things change, Laurel. Ethan's the man of the house now. Please leave peacefully before it gets ugly." For a few seconds, I stood frozen. The rain started falling, thin and cold. My heart pounded, but I refused to let them see me break. I stepped inside, ignoring their glares, and grabbed the few things that mattered most. My mother's ring, the photo album of our childhood, the binder of home repair receipts, and the small box that held the last letter Dad ever wrote me. As I packed, I heard Camila whisper to Ethan, "She'll be fine. She always lands on her feet." When I stepped back out into the rain, neighbors peeked from their windows. Some pretended not to see, others watched shamelessly. I loaded my bags into the car, my hands trembling but steady enough to start the engine. Before I drove off, I looked one last time at the porch swing swaying in the wind. It was still the same sound from my childhood, but it no longer belonged to me. That night, I drove north toward St. John's to my friend Clara's small apartment. She was shocked to see me standing there drenched and shaking. She didn't ask many questions, just handed me a towel and pointed me to the couch. Her apartment was small but warm, the air smelling faintly of lavender and coffee. I curled up on that couch, listening to the rain outside, and let the tears finally fall. I kept replaying Ethan's words in my head. A burden. It echoed over and over until it hollowed me out. How quickly love and loyalty can be rewritten by someone else's comfort. I thought of all the small sacrifices I'd made for him, how I skipped vacations to help him with his bills, how I paid for the roof repairs last year with my bonus check, how I always told myself we were a team, because that's what family meant. Around midnight, I opened my phone and scrolled through old photos, birthdays, holidays, even the day Ethan and Camila got engaged. I had helped plan that engagement dinner, ordered the cake, and spent $500 on decorations just to make her feel welcomed into the family. And this was my repayment. The next morning, I woke early, unable to sleep. I stood by the window, looking at the mist-covered skyline of Portland. My clothes were still damp from last night, and my heart felt heavier than the gray clouds outside. I didn't know where I would go next or what I would do, but one thing became clear. I would not beg to stay in a house I helped save. I decided to return to the house one last time to pick up a few boxes I had stored in the garage. Old documents, my mother's cookbook, and some antiques that belonged to my grandmother. I wanted to be gone completely, to leave no trace behind. I told myself this would be closure. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end of the story. Something about Camila's smug confidence, her rehearsed tone, and the way she held those keys like a trophy unsettled me. There was more to this than pride or space or marriage. It felt calculated, as if she had been waiting for this moment. When I pulled into the driveway at sunrise, the air was still. A thin envelope sat on the porch, damp around the edges, addressed in a hurried, unfamiliar handwriting. My name wasn't on it, it was addressed to Camila Bennett. I hesitated, staring at it. Something in me whispered to leave it alone, to walk away and never look back. But another part of me, the same one that had always wanted to protect Ethan, wanted to know. So I picked up the envelope, my fingers trembling. I didn't know then that what lay inside would change everything, would turn betrayal into revelation, and guilt into justice. At that moment, all I knew was this. I had lost my home, my brother's trust, and the life I thought I had built. But sometimes, the night you're thrown out of a house is the night life quietly begins to build you a new one. And though I didn't know it yet, that letter would open a door I never expected, a door that would show who truly belonged in that house and who never deserved to step inside. The following morning, the air outside was thick with mist, the kind that turns the city gray and silent. I hadn't slept much. My mind kept looping through the moment Ethan called me a burden. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Camila's voice saying, "This is our home now." By dawn, I decided to return to the house, not to fight, but to collect the last few boxes I had left in the garage. The neighborhood was quiet when I arrived. The maple trees along the sidewalk dripped with dew, and the porch steps glistened faintly. I parked my car by the curb and hesitated before stepping out. Everything looked exactly as it had the day before, yet it felt different. Something was wrong. Then I saw it, an envelope, damp around the edges, lying near the welcome mat. It was addressed to Camila Hart Bennett, written in rushed, heavy handwriting. There was no return address, no stamp. Someone had dropped it off by hand. I picked it up, turning it over. For a moment, I thought of leaving it there. It wasn't my business anymore. But something in my gut told me that this letter was important, dangerous, even. I glanced around. The street was empty. My heartbeat quickened as I slid my finger under the flap and unfolded the pages inside. The first line made my stomach twist. "Cam, you have to stop using my name when you meet the notary. We don't need both signatures if you get Ethan to execute the quitclaim." My eyes scanned the page faster. The letter continued in a cold, calculated tone, like instructions for a crime rather than a love note. Timeline for the house transfer. You push the new paperwork that puts the title in Ethan's name only. After that, use the power of attorney he signed at the bank last month. Once you control the joint accounts, move the funds to the trust we set up in my cousin's name. Keep this clean. We sell the place before the next tax cycle. You'll walk with at least $350,000. I get $120,000. Then you file and take half his retirement. You said you love me, prove it. I froze. The signature at the bottom read Tyler Rhodes, followed by a Seattle phone number. There were attachments, printed emails, screenshots of text messages, and even a receipt from a notary's office downtown. The email thread showed months of communication between Camila and this man. They weren't just lovers, they were partners in a scheme. In one message, Camila wrote, "He's sweet but simple. If I get the house in his name, it'll be easy to control him. Then, once the money's where we want it, I'll walk. Don't worry, babe, we'll be in California by Christmas." Another message listed numbers as if she were planning a heist. $190K savings, $520K in company shares, $70K in 401K. The fool thinks we'll start a family soon. I'll start packing once the quitclaim is signed. I read every word, the letters burning into my memory. The last attachment was a scanned notary receipt dated the same day she threw me out of the house. The fake name she used was Melissa Parker. The time on the document, 3:42 p.m., was about an hour before I came home and found my suitcase on the porch. It all clicked. Throwing me out wasn't about space or pride. It was part of her plan. She needed the house to be free of me so she could push the paperwork through quietly. My hands trembled as I gathered the pages back into the envelope. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. I wanted to scream, to storm inside and throw the truth in her face. But I knew if I confronted her alone, she'd twist it, turn Ethan against me again. She was clever, manipulative, calculated. I took out my phone and snapped photos of every page. Then I emailed them to myself, to a folder I titled Proof Do Not Delete. I backed it up with a password that no one could guess, even if they tried. For a long moment, I stood there on that porch with the damp letter pressed to my chest. My breath came out in short bursts. My mind raced through possibilities: call the police, confront Ethan, or walk away. But walking away wasn't an option now. This wasn't just betrayal, it was criminal. I drove to a coffee shop on Northwest 23rd Avenue, the same one Ethan liked. The smell of roasted beans and pastries filled the air as I ordered a black coffee and sat by the window. My hands shook as I typed out a message. Ethan, I found something.
Please meet me.
15 minutes. It's about Camila. He replied after a few minutes. I'm busy. My heart sank, but I typed back quickly. If you love me, just give me 15 minutes. A pause. Then came his short reply.
Fine.
Same place. 2 p.m. I spent the next few hours reading the documents again and again, memorizing the key details, the names, dates, bank references, and the mention of the power of attorney. Every word painted a clearer picture of who Camila really was. She hadn't just married my brother for love. She had built a calculated path into his life to take everything from him. At 2 p.m., Ethan walked in wearing his work jacket, looking tired and slightly annoyed. He sat across from me, eyes wary. I didn't waste time. I slid the envelope across the table and said quietly, "Before you say anything, just read." He frowned, pulling out the papers. As he read, his face changed, first confusion, then disbelief, then anger. His lips parted slightly when he reached the line about selling the house and taking half his retirement. When he saw the texts, his jaw clenched. "She called me simple," he whispered. "Yes," I said. "And she used your signature to start transferring assets." He rubbed his temples, eyes darting over the papers again. "This can't be real." "It's all there. The notary receipt matches the day she threw me out. The same day, she met someone downtown to file the fake paperwork." For a moment, he said nothing. Then he looked up at me with a mix of shame and heartbreak. "Laurel, what do I do?" I felt a strange calm settle over me. "First, you call the bank. Check every account and ask if any forms were recently updated. Then, call the notary's office. Verify this appointment. After that, you decide if you want to confront her, or if you'd rather let me handle it." He nodded slowly, as if his whole world had just tilted on its axis. "You were right," he murmured. "About her. About everything." As I watched my brother crumble under the weight of his wife's betrayal, I felt both sorrow and relief. He had finally seen the truth, but it had taken losing everything to open his eyes. That day, as I left the cafe, I looked up at the gray Portland sky and whispered to myself, "You threw me out to make room for your lies, Camila. But I'm coming back with the truth." What I didn't know then was that the truth would destroy far more than a marriage. It would unravel every illusion of family we had left. When Ethan agreed to meet me again later that afternoon, his voice was different, quieter, heavier. It wasn't the tone of a man defending his wife anymore. It was the tone of someone afraid that the life he'd built was starting to crack. I could hear it in the short pauses between his words. He said he wanted to talk, that he'd checked with the bank and things didn't look right. I didn't press for details. I just told him I'd meet him in 20 minutes. When I arrived, he was already sitting in the same coffee shop, The one on NW 23rd with the tall windows and the smell of roasted beans. He had a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes and his phone lying face down on the table. The moment I sat down, he exhaled deeply and said, "You were right." His voice cracked. I didn't need to ask how he found out. His eyes told me everything. He said the bank had confirmed two suspicious activities: a recent access to his account from a device in Seattle and a notarized power of attorney document he didn't remember signing. His checking account had a transfer request pending for $95,000, set to process the next morning. I slid the envelope of evidence toward him again. "Then it's time," I said softly. "We go home." He hesitated. "You mean?" "Yes," I interrupted. "We confront her. Together." We drove in silence through the gray Portland streets. The rain came down steadily, blurring the city lights into streaks. Ethan gripped the steering wheel tightly. I could see his knuckles turn white. For years, I had thought of him as my protector. Now I was the one leading him toward the truth. When we reached the house, I noticed Camila's car parked neatly in the driveway. Through the window, I saw her in the kitchen, leaning over her laptop, phone pressed to her ear. She was pacing slowly, her other hand twirling a strand of hair. Ethan and I stepped inside without knocking. The air was thick with tension. She turned, startled, her face quickly rearranging into that practiced smile. "You're back," she said, her tone light. "Laurel, shouldn't you be at your friend's place? You're not welcome here anymore." I stayed silent. Ethan placed the documents on the kitchen island. "Who's Tyler Rhodes?" he asked. Her smile faltered for the briefest second before she recovered. "What are you talking about?" "Don't lie," he said, voice trembling. "I called the bank. I know about the transfers, the notary appointment, the power of attorney. You were trying to take everything." Camila laughed, but it was thin, nervous. "You believe her?" She pointed at me. "Your sister, who can't even let go of this house. She forged that letter, Ethan. She's jealous." Ethan didn't move. His face was pale, but his voice was steady. "Then you won't mind if I call this number." He picked up the letter, tapped the number scrawled at the bottom, and placed his phone on speaker. The call rang once, twice, then a man's voice answered. "Cam? You at the bank? Did you send that notary the copy of Ethan's ID? Or do we wait till Friday? Also, are we still doing it under Ethan's name first, or just take the cash and go?" The silence that followed could have swallowed the entire room. Camila's eyes widened, her mouth opening, closing, then opening again without sound. Ethan's hand was shaking, but he didn't hang up. The voice on the other end kept talking, unaware. "Hello? Cam? You there?" Ethan ended the call. He stared at her, his jaw tightening. "You are going to steal from me," he said quietly. "From both of us." Camila's mask finally cracked. I can explain," she stammered. "It wasn't what it looked like. Tyler was just helping me manage." "Manage what?" I cut in. "The money? The house? Or your little vacation plan to California?" Her eyes darted between us, calculating. Then, like someone trying one last desperate play, she straightened her posture. "You can't prove anything," she said coldly. Ethan took a deep breath, then walked to the counter and picked up her laptop. "Actually, I can." He flipped the screen toward her. This was open when we walked in. She lunged forward, but he stepped back quickly. The emails were still on display, dozens of them between her and Tyler, discussing property transfers, account passwords, and a detailed schedule for liquidating assets. Ethan's voice was low. "You thought I'd never find out. You thought you could use me." Camila's face twisted. "You're pathetic, Ethan. You were so easy to fool. You think I ever wanted this life with your dull little sister in the next room, always watching us? Please." He flinched, but he didn't respond. Instead, he dialed another number, this time the police. I stood quietly as he explained everything: the forged notary, the attempted fraud, the financial manipulation. When the officers arrived 20 minutes later, Camila tried to deny it all until they asked to search the laptop. They found everything: emails, scanned signatures, fake IDs, even screenshots of account pages. They discovered a rental agreement for a small house near Bend, signed by both her and Tyler, dated 3 weeks in the future. It was undeniable. As they let her out of the house in handcuffs, she turned toward me with a glare sharp enough to cut glass. "You think you've won, Laurel? You'll never have this house. Never." I didn't answer. I just stepped aside and let the door close behind her. The moment she was gone, Ethan collapsed onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The rain beat against the windows, filling the silence with its steady rhythm. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "For everything. For not believing you. For choosing her over my own sister." I wanted to hate him, but I couldn't. The pain in his voice was real. "I warned you," I said softly. "But I never wanted this." He nodded, then reached for his phone again. "I'll file for divorce first thing tomorrow. I'll freeze every account. I'll fix this." I believed him. Because for the first time, I saw the man my brother used to be, the one who built forts with me in the living room when we were kids, who defended me from bullies in middle school, who used to laugh until his stomach hurt. But something inside me had shifted. I knew I couldn't stay there anymore, not in that house soaked in betrayal and memories. Ethan looked at me, tears still in his eyes. "Please come back home," he said quietly. "You belong here." I shook my head. "No," I said. "I love you, Ethan. But that house isn't home anymore. You need to start over." "So do I." He nodded slowly, understanding more than words could explain. That night, as I walked back to my car, I looked at the house one last time. The porch light glowed softly through the rain, and for a brief second, it looked almost peaceful again. But I knew the truth. Peace doesn't live in walls. It lives in freedom. And for the first time in years, as I drove away, I finally felt free. When I left Portland, I didn't look back. I packed my car with 2 suitcases, a box of books, and the envelope of repair receipts I had once thought would keep me tied to the Bennett house forever. The sun was setting behind the West Hills, and the sky burned with orange and pink streaks that made the moment feel both like an ending and a beginning. I drove north on I-5 towards Seattle with no clear plan, only the quiet conviction that I needed to start over, somewhere my last name meant nothing. By the time I arrived, the city lights shimmered across the water like broken glass. I found a tiny studio in Ballard for $1,650 a month. It was far from luxury: exposed brick walls, creaky floors, and a kitchen barely big enough for one person, but it was mine. I bought a second-hand sofa for $120 from a thrift store, a round oak table for $90, and a mismatched set of dishes that made me smile every morning. On my first night there, I sat by the small window overlooking the ship canal, eating takeout noodles and listening to the hum of boats drifting past. For the first time in years, I felt peace. The next week, I applied for a part-time job at a local property staging company called Harbor Home Designs. My boss, Nina, was a fast-talking woman with bright eyes and an intuitive sense for people. She liked my portfolio from my marketing days and said, "You've got an eye for light. We'll try you on a few projects." I threw myself into the work, arranging furniture, choosing fabrics, making empty rooms feel alive. Within a month, Nina handed me more keys and told me I could handle small listings on my own. I started earning a steady income, $1,200 in my first week, then $3,400 by the second month. It wasn't much, but it was honest and mine. Every night, I tracked every dollar in a small blue notebook, labeling envelopes: rent, savings, dream fund. By spring, I decided to leap. I registered my own small business, Laurel Rooms, LLC. I built a simple website showcasing before and after photos of my projects. My tone was calm, warm, and authentic. Within weeks, clients began calling. One couple wanted me to design their rental property near Lake Union. Another hired me to prepare their townhouse for sale. The reviews were glowing. Then came my first international client, a relocation manager from London who was setting up housing for a tech executive in Seattle. He offered to pay in pounds, £8,000 for staging a four-bedroom property in Queen Anne. When the transfer cleared, I stared at my bank app for nearly 5 minutes. It wasn't about the money. It was proof that my new life was real, and it was working. I saved 20% of every check, keeping my receipts filed neatly in labeled folders. When my account balance crossed $82,000, I met with a loan officer at a local credit union. Her name was Jessica, and she smiled when she said, "You qualify, Laurel." I cried quietly in my car after signing the pre-approval papers. 3 months later, I bought a two-bedroom condo in Ballard for $412,000. The down payment was $82,400, nearly everything I had, but the moment I held the keys, I felt a quiet triumph. The walls were painted dull beige, so I spent an entire weekend repainting them cream and the doors a soft blue, the same color as the Oregon coast sky I grew up under. I planted herbs, basil, rosemary, and mint in a long box on the balcony. At night, the smell of rosemary drifted into the kitchen as I cooked simple dinners, sometimes pasta, sometimes soup, always enough to make the place smell like home. Ethan called occasionally. The first time, he apologized through tears, his voice breaking on every word. I didn't say much, just listened. I knew guilt was something he would have to live with, not something I could take away. Weeks later, he asked to meet, and we agreed on a diner halfway between Seattle and Portland, in Tacoma. He looked older when he walked in, thinner, quieter. When we sat down, he slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a cashier's check for $24,300. "Your share," he said simply. I went through every old receipt. The taxes, the roof, the water heater. You paid for half the house, even when you shouldn't have had to. I didn't want to take it, but I did. It wasn't about the money. It was about acknowledgement.
Thank you, I said.
You didn't have to. Yes, I did, he replied. Then, more softly, I wish I had believed you sooner. I smiled faintly. I wish I had believed in myself sooner, too. The legal case against Camila dragged through the court system for almost a year. The police discovered she had used a fake ID at the notary and attempted to transfer private account data to someone in another state. She pleaded guilty to fraud and forgery, taking a deal to avoid a long sentence. I didn't attend the hearings. Watching her downfall wasn't part of my healing. I had already moved on. Sometimes, when I drove down to visit friends in Portland, I took a detour through our old neighborhood. The Bennett house still stood under the same cedar tree, the gray paint slightly faded, the porch swing still swaying in the wind. Once, I parked across the street and just watched. The house didn't hurt me anymore. It was just wood and nails and memories, nothing more. I used to think I would spend my whole life in that house, proving my worth to people who refused to see it. Now, standing miles away, I understood something much simpler. You can lose a house and still build a home. My condo isn't large. It fits neatly into my new rhythm. 2 rooms, a tiny balcony, a bank account that grows slowly, and a calendar full of clients who trust me. Some mornings, I wake early to watch the sun rise over the canal, the sky glowing soft pink above the boats. I drink my coffee and feel proud of the quiet life I've built with my own hands. My work keeps expanding. I've staged homes for young couples, retirees, and even a few small companies looking to impress investors. Each space tells a story of transformation, and in each one, I leave a little piece of myself, proof that beauty can come from rebuilding. Ethan and I talk more often now, though we keep things light. He sold the Portland house and moved into an apartment closer to his office. He says he's happier now, and I believe him. We'll never go back to what we were, but maybe we don't have to. On quiet evenings, I water the herbs on my balcony and think of my mother. I imagine her sitting beside me, her gentle hands brushing the soil, her voice soft as she says, "You did it, Laurel. You found peace." Sometimes I whisper back, "I finally did, Mom." I've learned that forgiveness doesn't always mean returning to what broke you. Sometimes it's choosing peace over connection, freedom over familiarity. My life may be small now, but it feels large in the ways that matter. It stretches from the past I've survived to the future I'm still building, a future that belongs entirely to me. When I lock my door at night and hear the soft hum of the city beyond the window, I smile. Because this time, I'm not living in someone else's house. I'm living in my own story.